Darlene, thank you for that Karen Drucker song today. Such a lovely song. I just want to sing along with it whenever I hear it. And it really fits in with my talk today, the title of which is Blinded by Your Own Light. You know, we are the face of God, each one of us, and we forget that. And it's unusual to think about it, but we do blind ourselves with our own light. And I want to share today something that I actually used last week. It was a lovely reading by the poet Rilke, something that is just so special. And it fits in again with what I'm talking about today. So I'm going to read this to you. I am circling around God, around an ancient tower, and I've been circling for 1,000 years. I still don't know. I don't know if I'm a falcon or a storm or a great song. Close enough to feel the heat, but not to burn my wings. And so I asked the question, you know, are we circling around God? Just circling around rather than being it, rather than really feeling it, rather than jumping into the fire, as I said last week. We really need to be jumping into the fire. And we're not going to burn our wings, and we're not going to get burned in any way at all, because we are the fire. You know, it is a metaphor for God. And this Spirit God lives within each and every one of us. And we need to remember that. We need to remember how powerful we are, how magnificent we are. And so jumping into the fire, we're not going to get hurt. In fact, jumping into the fire, jumping into God, jumping into Spirit is what we're called to do. Because anything that has happened to us in our lives that has hurt us in some way, any limitations that we have, any lack in our lives, anything that we don't feel is absolutely perfect, um, anything that is constantly disturbing us or preventing us from being our highest and best, those old belief systems, those are the things that can burn off in the fire. You know, when we're deeply into God, where we're in that space where we're fully aligned with and fully connected, you know, all of that stuff can just be burned away. And we can actually step into the magnificence that we are. Thing is, we don't often believe that, let alone remember it. And so it's really time for us to do that. As I said, jump into the fire. Let's dive in right here and right now. And let's make a difference. You know, it's the eternal flame within. It's always there. You know, we step aside from it, but it never leaves us. And so let's be conscious of that, and let's just shine that light wherever we go, and let us move about without fear. You know, burn off the fear and the fire. When we have the most powerful thing that has ever existed within us, how could we ever be afraid? How can we let ourselves be afraid? You know, we just can't do that. In Spirit, there's nothing to burn. In Spirit, all is perfect. And so we must be conscious of living in Spirit, in that perfection, and knowing that we are fully supported in that perfection. And then we can face what's going on in the outer world. You know, we're born of the light, absolutely born of the light. As little babies, we can be these joyful, innocent little creatures. And we start to lose that along the way because we have so much help. We have so many people reminding us that we're really imperfect rather than that we're perfect beings. And as we do that, you know, as we forget that we are spirit in human form, you know, then we are being blinded by our own light because we're not facing our light. We're not accepting it. We're not believing that it is ours. You know, it belongs somewhere else or to someone else. We have to get right back into that, into knowing the truth of who we are and not ever letting go of that. Because when we do, then all of the old stuff can just melt away. It can simply be gone forever. Are we ready for that? Are you ready for that? I know I'm ready for it. You know, I don't want any more suffering or any more woundedness in my life. I want life to unfold with ease and with grace and with love and with joy. I want to be a joyful person. You know, imagine who it is you want to be and then step into it right here and right now. You know, we're challenged by what we've rejected. There are parts of us that have just kind of gone to sleep. And when we hide our negatives, we're hiding and the things that we don't want to focus upon, that that trouble us, that worry us, when we want to run away from those things, we're also hiding from our light. It's like hiding under the bushel, that proverbial hiding our light under the bushel. We have to remember that we were born for leadership, that we are powerful beings. We're born to experience joy and love and compassion, and to live our lives with wild abandon. And it may not always be appropriate, but we know when it is appropriate. And to be able to just express that is such a glorious thing. And so that's what I'm inviting you all to do today, in this moment. I was remembering the poet Robert Bly talked about 2-year-olds and saying that 2-year-olds have 360-degree personalities. And isn't that the truth? You just see little 2-year-olds, they're just full of life and love, and they're just vibrating to everything in the universe. They're the center of the universe. And if they're upset about something, they just let it out. They let you know they're upset with it. And a few seconds later, they're just back to being happy again. They're not carrying all of this stuff around with them. That's something that we really have to remember. There's this wonderful energy that radiates from every part of our bodies, but then we hear from parents, from other people, sit down, sit up straight, be quiet, don't make so much noise, um, try to be a good person, will you? um, Little children should be seen and not heard. Don't ask so many questions. That was the one that was the biggest one for me. Don't ask so many questions. And also, don't talk so much. I'll give you 5 cents if you'll be quiet for 15 minutes. Those kinds of things, when we're really tiny, have a big effect on us. We start to own them. We start to believe in them. And there comes a point in our lives where we're uncomfortable. I call it divine discontent, where we don't want to be like that anymore. There's some kind of an inner calling, and we're not quite sure what it is, but it's really a call to authenticity. It goes back to when we were 2 years old and we wanted to shout at the top of our lungs. We wanted to shout with joy and what I call holy hosannas. But as we get older, it's like, well, what would people think? That was one of the things my mother used to say to me all the time. What will people think? And then it becomes important all of a sudden what people think, and we start being inauthentic in our lives. And I was thinking about this as I was getting ready to speak, because I have a friend who is fully exuberant in all that she does. And I was remembering, going for an ice cream cone with her, and we were in a lineup, and she talked to somebody across the counter before we got to the bins of ice cream so that we could see what flavors there were. And she asked if he had a special flavor in stock that day. And he said, yes, he did. And she did a happy dance, and she let out a big whoop and danced around in a circle and said, whoopee, I'm so happy, I'm so happy. And I was kind of looking at her. Everybody in the shop was looking at her, and they were smiling. They were smiling at her joy. They weren't thinking, "Well, there's a crazy person," and they weren't thinking, "Well, if I respond with some joy, what will people think?" It was so spontaneous that you absolutely had to just laugh and go with it. And I was remembering having a dinner with her one night, and with a couple of other people, and it was raclette that we were having. I don't know if you've had a raclette dinner. It's something that originated in Switzerland and also spread through parts of Europe. And you can find it on some menus in Canada, but not very often. And there are 2 kinds of raclette makers. They're they're the little burners that have the open flame, or else you can get an electric one that's quite a bit larger. But anyway, she was using a couple of little burners that night. And what you do is you take a little metal tray with a handle on it, and you put a bit of meat into it, or chicken or shrimp, whatever the protein might be, and you sit it on the flame until it's mostly cooked. And then you add some vegetables that have been partly cooked on top. And as things start to sizzle, you put a piece of cheese on top, a delicious piece of cheese. And when the cheese is melted, typically, in my experience, because one of my daughters lived in Switzerland and we used to have raclette dinners, we would then put what was on the tray onto our plates, and would eat whatever it was. The thing that was different with my friend was that she lived in Germany for a number of years. And what she learned to do was to take a little pot of brandy and to pour some brandy onto the little tray, and to tip it slightly so it would catch on fire and a big flame would go up. And when she was demonstrating this, and when she did this, she let out a great big whoop about the flame, and it was wahoo! Look at this! Isn't this wonderful? And we were all laughing and enjoying it and thinking it was wonderful too. And I realized that, the me, the person that I grew up as, would never do that. I had to be seen and not heard. I had to be quiet. I shouldn't ask questions. Even in class, when I was going to school, when the teachers would say, "Do you have any questions?" I would have questions, but I would never ask the question because I'd been trained not to ask questions. That's shifting. Thank goodness it's taken a long time, but that's shifting. So you get some sense of how we repress our joy, and how we try to gain the approval of our parents, of teachers, of our peers, when our authentic self is just wanting to burst with joy. And it's unfortunate that this happens to us. I was thinking, there are some children or teenagers who overcome this at a very early age. I think there's a kind of determination that they're not going to let anything stop them. They're not going to let anything get them down. And I was thinking about President Joe Biden, and how he's talked about himself as a child. He stuttered terribly. He could not get through a sentence at all. And there came a point in his young years, his very young years, where he decided that he was not going to be like that he was going to overcome this handicap. And he was, of course, bullied because of it. People made fun of him. So he started to read poetry, and he would stand in front of a mirror every day and would recite poetry. And he would just choose 3 or 4 words at a time and would speak those words, would pause, then do the next 3 or 4 words. And he kept on doing that and kept on doing that until he could speak without a stutter. And if you listen to him now when he's speaking, you'll notice that there's a kind of rhythm to his speech. There's a pattern to it. A few words at a time. There's not a long pause of any kind, but there's a few words, there's a slight inflection in his speech where he continues with the next few words. And he said that when he's very tired, he sometimes begins to stammer a little bit again. And that was used against him in the last election when the former president made fun of him, not about his stutter, but made fun of him, saying that he had dementia. And there were people who started to believe that because they would notice that President Biden would sometimes repeat himself or would repeat a word a couple of times, that there'd be a bit of not really a stammer, but there would be something there that just didn't seem quite comfortable. And so knowing his story, when people heard his story, they were astonished at what he overcame, and that he mentors other children with stutters. If he encounters any child who has one, he will work with that child to help them. It's extraordinary, the gift that he had through stuttering and overcoming it, of what he's been able to do. And to be in public office, to run for public office, to have been a senator for so many years, is phenomenal when you think of the number of speeches that he had to make. It reminded me also of the movie The King's Speech. You know the story of George VI, who stuttered terribly and had to overcome that so that he could speak to the people. There are people who overcome incredible obstacles. You know, psychologist Carl Jung said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making our darkness conscious, though at the same time we risk some audacity. I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to read it actually. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, though at risk of some time audacity. So we become audacious. You know, we give up our shadow selves. We give up those things that we have learned to believe about ourselves that simply aren't the truth. The things that we were taught to believe ourselves, that we were imperfect, that we had so much that we had to prove. My goodness, if we understand ourselves as children of God, as expressions of God, this divinity working in, as, and through us, how can we ever think of ourselves as being imperfect? We may have imperfect thoughts. We may do things that we think are imperfect, but at our core, there is divine perfection. And if we can but remember that, then we can burn away the darkness, burn away the shadow sides of ourselves. And instead we can just live in a place of light and express our joy and express our enthusiasm. Now, we're not all going to go around singing and dancing and going wahoo about things, because it's not necessarily in our character as spiritual beings who don't have any stuff going on. But we can be joyful and we can be non-judgmental and we can enjoy people who just want to live, laugh, and love and express that all over the place. So where do we stand with that, each one of us? What is it that we need to just, burn away in pure spirit, where we are not burned, but the things that we no longer need to have in our lives are just, basically evaporated, sent away, surrendered somewhere else where they dissipate into nothingness now and forever. Dr. Holmes always said we always have a choice. We do. We make choices about things all the time, but we get to choose how we're going to feel. We get to choose how we're going to act. We get to choose how we are going to express God in our lives. And it's important for us to remember that we are always at choice. So if we're saying, oh, I can't do this because, then it's because we're not choosing to do it. Instead, we're choosing to believe in limitations, choosing to believe in lack. We're living in our shadow selves rather than with our passion. And it's in our passion that we really need to move. And Dr. Holmes also, of course, wrote, principle is not bound by precedent. And what that basically means is that anything that happened in the past, has no control over me today or tomorrow. I get to choose. I can put all of that behind me and say, it matters not. I will not blame anyone for what has happened to me in the past. I will not belittle myself. I will not think I'm less than. And I will not be upset that my parents shut me down at some point or that somebody else did. Instead, right here today, I choose to be my full, authentic self. I choose to express exactly who I am with all of the passion and joy that I have within me. And that's the choice that we have. There are other people like Joe Biden who were plagued with stuttering. Winston Churchill was, and he was also dyslexic, and he became a great orator. He inspired so many people, took them through a war and inspired them. It was phenomenal. James Earl Jones, the wonderful African-American actor with a beautiful voice, he stuttered as a child. And now he has actually recorded the Bible for those who want to listen to it. that deep, beautiful voice of his. Not a stammer anywhere, no hesitation anywhere. He overcame that. There's someone whose name I was trying to remember. I think it was Peavy. Peavy is what kind of comes up in my memory. And as a child, he was very timid. He always hid behind his mother's skirts. And even as he got older, as he was a teenager, he was really, really frightened um, of doing things, of stepping out, and was fearful of new places. And he talked himself right out of it. He burned that stuff up big time, and he became the first person to reach the North Pole. Imagine that. An explorer, a pioneer who reached the North Pole. And Charles Lindbergh, the famous aviator, everyone knew his name. He was afraid of heights. Can you imagine being afraid of heights? And then, flying a small plane, across continents. Just an extraordinary, extraordinary thing. It shows that we can do anything if we set our minds to it. We can give up absolutely anything that is upsetting us along the way, and that is limiting us, that is keeping us from accomplishing our greater good, from being the highest and best that we can be. Michael Beckwith wrote something that is, I think, important for us to consider. Life is a cross between being a roto-rooter. I always try to say that 5 times in a row. Life is a cross between being a roto-rooter and a midwife. The roto-rooter does the digging and revealing, and the midwife tends to be birthing us into our greater selves. We have to dig. We have to be roto-rooters. We have to dig inside ourselves to find out what it is that's holding us back. And then we can be rebirthed. We're being rebirthed all the time anyway, every moment. I mean, something new is happening to us, and we're becoming someone, hopefully becoming someone different and someone better every moment. Just have to give up the past. Stop blaming people. Stop thinking that it's someone else's fault for the way we are, and stop blaming ourselves as well. Just know that today we get to choose again. We get to choose differently. This is the time. And to do it right now, right at this moment, to start it right now. Birth can feel like a death in a way, because it means that we're tossing out old stuff that we don't need anymore. And let us be grateful for that. Let us be grateful for all that we just get rid of that is keeping us from doing whatever it is that we really want to do with our lives. The things that really call to us, because there is that calling within us, that deep calling, and that calling is to be spirit, to be with spirit, and to be spirit, and to express spirit in all that we do. And so we need to accept so much that we might never have imagined was possible, or that we might never have allowed ourselves to be. We really need to know that something great and grand and glorious and magnificent is happening, and it's happening now. It's happening now because we are choosing it to happen now. We are choosing this for our lives. We are choosing to just be the highest and greatest version of ourselves that we can be. And then life becomes magnificent, because that's the way that it works. As we believe, it is done unto us. And so let us step out of our fear and step away from that negativity and from limitations and from lack, and know that we are divinely guided, and that we are happy, healthy, prosperous human beings who are in love with life, and in love whatever way we are expressing it in life. That's really what it's all about and why we're here. I have something I want to read to you that was written by Reverend Deborah Johnson, who wrote a book called The Sacred Yes, and I really love it. And this is God talking to Deborah. Let's stop looking for signs about whether or not something is the right thing to do. That's kind of like bargaining with God. Give me a sign and I'll know it's the right thing to do. We don't do that. That's that's bargaining with God. That's not believing that God is really there working for us. And so Deborah says, you can never embrace life without understanding the I am of your own being in the context of me being the great I am. You will never know how good life is without knowing this. You will never know how much more love there is to have. You will never know how much more music there is to make. You will never know how much greater the power and authority you have is over the world and over the world of outer effects without knowing who you are in me. In other words, without knowing who you are in God, who you are in spirit. You are not a little thing in this great wide world. You are a big expression of the divine. God knows no little or big. You know, big for someone might be making that wonderful raclette dinner and enjoying every second of it and laughing and loving their way through it. Or it might be being the head of the United Nations. No big or small in the mind of God. But we are not called upon to be little. We are called upon to be the best that we can be with whatever it is that we do. And it all starts now. It starts right now with you and with God. The God in you as you, expressing through you. And so it is. I bless you today, and I thank you for being with us. And, as I'm fond of saying, this is the time we typically pass the basket when we're together in person. However, today we are asking or inviting you to go to our website, www.cslvictoria.org, and you can make a donation there through PayPal, or you can send a donation by e-transfer to Rev Carrie at shaw.ca. That's Rev Carrie. Carrie is spelled Carrie at shaw.ca, and I will make the deposit into our center's bank account. So thank you so much for your contributions. They're what keep us going, and they are what are going to open our center again successfully when we can finally be together again. Most recently, Dr. Bonnie Henry said that places of worship will not be opening again right away. A week ago, she said it was possible we might for Easter. Now that is looking less likely. Although 10 people in your bubble can get together out of doors for barbecues or picnics, we cannot, as a congregation, get together at our center, and churches cannot get together in the same way that we're accustomed to. And so we keep listening for news, knowing that we're coming out of this, and that this disease called COVID is going to be erased by the great fire of God as well, and through all of the gifts that so many people have brought forward to scientifically make this possible. And I look forward to that day when we can all be together again. And in closing, I just want to ask you to just join me in a quiet prayer, knowing that you know the truth of who you are, that you are God in expression, that God is always with you, as God is always with me, as God is always with everyone. And so we get rid of those negative beliefs that we've had. We get rid of those limitations. We kick away those obstacles that have been in our paths, and we go forward instead, just shining that brilliant light. We take the blinders off. We see the light, we know the light, we share the light. And as we do, our lives start getting better and better, as do the lives of those around us, as does life on this planet. It's all about the love. It's all about the light. Let us hold these things in our hearts as we go forward into the coming week. I'm so grateful to know that this is so. And so it is. God bless you all, and thank you for being with us today. See you next week.